I'm Cathy Peffen with World at Work TV, and I'm here today with Cathy Kacher, who's president of the Career Life Alliance, and with Trina Hoefling, who is the master teacher at University of Denver. So Cathy, let's start with you. What is employee engagement?
You know, employee engagement, it really boils down to the sense of belonging, that primal human need that every single one of us have to feel that we belong to a place, that we're engaged, that we're free to ask questions and make mistakes and be appropriate and be silly. And many organizations today are finding that element is missing, especially on their virtual teams.
And it seems so much like common sense, right?
Right.
But we end up also thinking about, in order to be engaged, do we need to understand what causes disengagement? So we ensure that we are negating those effects, shall we say. So what are some of the conditions that we see with disengagement?
Well, with disengagement, I think the greatest cause of employee disengagement is uncertainty. I mean, who can't think of a time when they were in a meeting or someplace and they weren't certain what to do? It causes a bit of a paralysis. And with paralysis comes caution, and with caution comes not a lot. It's a real slow-moving train. So that's a big one. People not understanding and being clear on what the expectations are. And other disengagement is leadership. When you have leadership that isn't encouraging employees, when it's a psychologically unsafe place to work, that causes tremendous disengagement, and again, very powerful for the virtual worker. Oftentimes they're working alone, you know, in their homes or in a coffee shop, and there's all this going on a conference call or in meetings, and they're wondering, can I talk now? And you know, who hasn't been in that awkward conversation on a conference call where it's like, and they're all trying to jump in and nobody can get a word in.
No, and that's so important, Cathy. And you know, as we've talked, Trina, you had indicated that since 2005, we've seen a 103% increase in the number of employees who are virtual, whether it's through working at home or just not in a different office environment, but on the team that reports into you. So that has to present some challenges to the manager and the rest of the team. What do you think engagement means to these individuals and teams, and how do we continue to strive for that?
Well, I think the risk of virtual isolation is very disengaging. If there is an unsafe work environment, as Cathy was talking about, people can hide better on a virtual team. They can simply just not speak up on a conference call. They can go dark instead of having their face on camera and multitask. So it's just easier for them to step back and stop caring. So that is probably the biggest disincentive for engagement. But a fully engaged employee is someone who wants to contribute, wants to speak up, has an opinion, and fights for that airtime to speak forward, not to fight with other people, but just to say, hey, I have another idea, or have we thought about, or I've experienced this with a customer, is there a way we can address that? So we really want to create a work environment where people will act and speak up and know that it's welcome, instead of being perceived as a troublemaker or somebody who's just wanting to change for the sake of change. And in a virtual environment, it's just more important because of the isolation. Virtual presence has to be there, not virtual distance. People long to belong.
Right. And how do you think we can continue to motivate employees and to have them to want to be express themselves and really be part of the team in that perspective?
Well, simply ask. You know, what do you think? I mean, it's amazing how much people will reveal if you take the time to ask and you're really interested in listening to the answer, adding to the conversation, building on the idea instead of saying things like, well, you know, that's just not going to work here and we've never done it that way, or we tried that, you know, the old classic disengaging comments. So I think the manager plays a key role in inviting that virtual team member, any team member, but particularly virtual team members, into the conversation by simply asking and listening and responding.
Now that's great, because as a manager, how do I truly engage some of these virtual employees? So you mentioned about listening and reaching out, but what else can organizations do to truly drive some of this engagement? Cathy?
I think one of the most important aspects an organization can provide a virtual employee is a training around how to stay visible. If you are alone in your home office and you're unsure of the expectation, it's not necessarily on the organization or the manager to make sure you are heard and seen. It is your job, it is your career. But organizations need to share with employees how they can do that in a virtual setting.
Oh, that's great. Trina, anything?
So it's a
to
sense
add?
of a shared responsibility, as Cathy was saying. It's sort of like everything is changing and it's nobody's fault, but we're all affected. So let's all work together. One of the first things that a new virtual team can do are onboarding a new member to the team, especially if it's a virtual member, is setting up team agreements, making clear communication plans. What's the infrastructure? Who needs to talk to whom about what, how often, and through what forum? What's our collaboration tools? Are we leveraging those to connect people up, or are we just using those as a way to monitor behavior?
What else can you share about engagement that you would like our World at Work listeners to?
Well, I think the key to successful engagement really does lie with the manager. So often our organizations are putting people in management positions that they might not necessarily be a fit to lead teams. So who hasn't seen, a brilliant salesperson? They're a director of sales right now. And what do you end up with? A really good salesperson. Right. Still, it's not a people person, and it's not necessarily somebody who's leading. So being selective about who you're putting in the leadership position, providing some assessment, and then by golly, give them some training on how to engage your virtual team. You have got to be intentional. This does not happen naturally. And we've let the virtual world of work has rolled in on us. And we've all adapted, and we think we're doing pretty good until you step back and you look at the statistics. Research tells us there's dramatic decrease in, especially for the virtual workers, there's dramatic decrease in innovation, there's decrease in productivity, there's decrease in customer and on-time delivery. And why is there decrease? Because they're a little bit paralyzed and they're not sure what to do. And when you don't know what to do, you slow down and you're very cautious.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I appreciate both of you joining us today.